Hello, sketch clubbers. Hope you're all ready for this class. I hope I'm ready for this class. Alright, as I said in my class notes, we're actually going to start out with a technique that I use to get my creativity started. We're going to make a custom brush, and then we're going to use it to paint with. That's how I created this one, for example. I'll show you a couple others that I've done using this same basic technique. For this one I used a very fuzzy brush. That's why I named him Fuzzy. And for this one I used a very smooth brush. In fact, I think I just used the smooth round mostly for a much smoother look. So you don't have to make a custom brush, but we're going to do that anyway to get us started here. Alright, so now to get started, I'm going to start by making a brush. I will make the brush by using another brush. I'm going to use the normal hard round brush, and we'll make some little marks on this page here, and then we'll turn it into a brush that we can use, and hopefully it'll give us some creative juice things going on. When you make a brush, you always want to use black for a lot of it, and then I always like to add in a little bit of lighter gray. The gray parts will come out semi-transparent when you actually use the brush. You can be pretty random about it, but you want to keep it mostly in the upper part of the screen, more or less in a square of some kind. So now what I'm going to do with this little smudge that I made, I'm going to save it as a photo, as a PNG into my camera roll. Alright, now once you have it saved as a photo, you open up the brush menu and you scroll all the way to the bottom, which could be a long way if you make a lot of brushes like I do, and at the bottom there's a little add button. So you tap that add button and then you pick the photo that you just made. This is an example of a different brush that I made, but it gives you the idea of how you should scale and center your little image in there. This will become the custom brush. And once you're happy with it fitting inside there like that, click the Use button up there at the top. Then once you have the brush image centered and you said you're going to use it, you then go to the Edit menu, and there's all these little things in here that you can adjust, different settings. Angle, flow, scatter, spacing. For what we're going to do for this brush, we'll wind up setting the flow high. We'll set the spacing wide enough so that things don't overlap too much. I'm going to demonstrate what these do in a second. And then we'll leave the jitter alone. We won't use any jitter or taper or any of that stuff. Alright, so now we have our brush in there, and I've selected a very wide spacing, and now you'll see as I paint with this new brush that I just made, it will draw the images one after the other. So that's how it looks when you have a wide spacing. Now I'm going to decrease the spacing so that things start to overlap a little bit. So now we have something a little more interesting. Almost looks like a chain of some kind. I'll decrease the spacing just a little bit more, I think, so we get slightly denser. Alright, so that's the brush that we're going to use to get us started here. We'll see where it takes us. It has some interesting properties to it. You can, of course, play around with the settings more, and you can get a lot of different effects by playing with the jitter settings. The best way to learn them is just to try them out and see what they do. They're very flexible. You can do a lot of interesting things with custom brushes. Before I go to the next part, are there any questions that anyone has? I'll pause for a moment for questions. Alright, so next I'm going to take a little time to talk about colors. I like colors, and I've tried the technique that some folks use of doing it all in black and white first, grayscale, and then adding colors later. That doesn't work for me. I got to start out with colors. Let's talk a little bit about how to choose colors and what to do. And I'm going to explain the color wheel and how I use it. There's, of course, a lot of ways to use it, but this is my personal technique. Okay, so when you look at the color wheel, you can see there's all these colors around the outside edge. Right now I have a purple selected right here. So when I want to choose other colors that I'm going to use with this purple, I have a couple of different ways that I go about it. I can choose a few other colors that are close to this one, like that, for example, and then I'll pick one from almost directly on the other side of the wheel to use as highlights. Now, it doesn't mean that I'll use the fully saturated version of all these colors, but I'll pick colors in this general range and then colors from the other side as highlights. That's one way of doing it. What we're trying to get here is colors that are going to harmonize with each other and look nice together, which is a big part of how the painting is going to look when you're done. Another way to do it is to imagine a letter Y in here and pick three colors. So you got the purple, and you pick one over there, it's more red or orange, and then another one over there, it's the bluish green. So you have them widely spaced that way. That'll also work well. You don't want to like mix all the colors so you have an even amount of each one, but you want to pick one as your main color and then pick from the other ones as they, for your shadows or for your highlights. You can use these colors. Now there is a little program that I sometimes use on the iPad. It's called Palettes, and even though it's designed really for web designers and it doesn't translate very well into using it for painting, I have found that I can create palettes in there, bring them up. I actually use the reference photo feature of Sketch Club to bring them up there, and then I sample off of those to get some colors. This is a screenshot of the palettes program, and down at the bottom are these little color tools. You can kind of see how they've got the different things in there. One color, more than one color, the three color wheel. And I find that sometimes useful if I want a range of colors that I know are going to look nice together. So that's enough talking about colors, unless anyone has any questions about that in general. Alright, well then let's start actually doing a painting. We'll be using our brush and we'll see where it goes. And I'm not sure where it's going to go. We'll find out. Alright, so one thing I've I very much recommend is not to paint on a white canvas. When you start out with white, that's the brightest possible color that you can have on the canvas. It leaves you nowhere to go. And it's very difficult to tell whether something you're putting down is bright or dark, because basically everything you put down is darker than the canvas. Alright, so now we're going to get our purple background. I've chosen a darkish purple as a starting place, and I'm going to use a fairly orangey, reddish, pinkish skin color to start with our thing. We'll just kind of block something out with our brush and let it go, see what happens. So as you can see, I'm just sort of blocking out the basic shape of a head and a little bit of the shoulders using this color and this funky brush that we made, and it immediately produces a sort of interesting little texture to it, which I like. It just makes it more interesting to me. I may wind up, of course, smoothing it out a lot later, but I like to start here. Actually, that's a good point. This should have been on the next layer, and I totally forgot. So let me do it again and put it on the correct layer this time. There we go. Alright, now it's on a different layer. I will be talking quite a bit about layers as we go along, because I use them extensively for all kinds of things, as you'll see here in a moment. So yeah, so now we've got some kind of funky looking thing. One thing about the technique that I use here is you'll discover it looks really bad for a really long time. It doesn't start to look good till near the end. Alright, so now I'm going to go up to the next layer, which will be my initial shadowish layer, and I'm going to start blocking in a little bit of the shapes that are on a face, where the shadows go, the eye sockets, the nose, the mouth, under the chin, around the side of the face, using a cooler color this time. So I'll use some of the sort of purple that's in the background right now. Start off with basically what looks like eyeglasses. Those are the eye sockets and the bridge of the nose area. I just darken it in. I mean, it just looks kind of nutty, but that's what I do. Then I put a little shadow for the nose. I don't get detailed at this point. I'm just sticking it down there. And then for the mouth, I use a kind of an upside down U shape. For the upper lip, I don't draw the lower lip, just the upper lip. Alright, and that's a nice crappy looking lip. Now what I'm going to do is put a little shadow underneath. This is actually the shadow that's underneath the lower lip, and I'm going to let that define the lower lip without actually making a lower lip at this point. All these shapes are going to get refined quite a bit as we go along, but this is a starting spot. Now what I've done, when you look at the layers here, let me show you the layers. See, I have the mouth and nose on a separate layer at the moment. The reason I do that is so that I can use the transform tool at this point to adjust the size and position of the nose and mouth to get a little different feel. Just because I need to look at it. I need to see what it's going to look like before I choose. I might decide that I like them smaller like that, and I'll put them there. I can also make them bigger. I could tilt them, get a different expression out of them just by changing the position of the layer. gives me the opportunity to toy around with it a little bit until I see something that begins to interest me. It's still a long way from where it will eventually go, but I can get some concept of what I'm after here just by playing with those. So I'm going to go with this fairly small nose and mouth. Now that I have that, I'm going to start working a little bit on the eyeballs. Now the way I do eyeballs is very strange, and I admit it, but this is how I do them. So I'm going to go up to another layer, and I'm going to pick the skin color, and then I'm going to lighten it up a lot. Not all the way to white, but it'll be basically a really light version of the skin color. Thing I want to mention is when you're doing colors, just as a general rule, lighter colors should be less saturated. That means less color in them. So the more white you put in, the less color, and vice versa with the darks. As you make the color darker, put more color into it so it's more saturated. That'll give you a really nice range of colors and tones. Alright, so now I'm going to draw an eyeball, and I'm not going to make the usual shape that you're expecting. I'm going to make an actual round eyeball right in this socket here. Alright, so there's one round eyeball. I have that on a separate layer, and I'm going to copy that layer, and I'll move it over so that then I have two. I do that because I just have a really hard time making eyes the same size. So by doing this, I make sure that they're about the same size. Alright, now that I have the two white eyeballs in the sockets, looking scary and ghost-like, I will put the irises in a similar way. So now I have what looks like the gingerbread man, but this will turn into something nice eventually here. So we now have the two eyeballs, and we have the two irises, and right now the irises are on separate layers, which means that I can move them around. And I will do that here just to kind of goof around with it a little bit and get different looks out of it. So you see, just by moving the layer, I can change the direction of that he's looking, or she. I don't even know if this is male or female yet, and just kind of play around with it. I think I'm actually going to leave them in the center for now. We may move them again later. So I'll merge those two onto a layer and leave them in the center. So now, to recap, we have our purple background, we have our pink skin part where the body and the head are, and we have a little bit of shadow stuff which is in purple right now, and then we have a couple of eyeballs and a couple of irises all in these different layers. Now they won't stay on different layers very long because I'm going to need those layers for other stuff, but for now that's where they are. Actually do a stop motion thing that way by moving the layer around. All right, so I don't know. I don't see how you could really have any questions yet, but I'll stop anyway. Anyone have any questions at this point? Okay, very good. Then I'm going to go ahead and merge down the irises onto the eyeballs, and then we'll start giving them a little bit of a shape. So let's do that. On the layer directly above the eyeballs, those beautiful ghostly eyeballs, I'm now going to take some of the skin color, just a little bit lighter perhaps, and I'm going to draw the eyelids directly over these eyeballs. So now we'll start actually putting eyelids on this thing. I'm still going to use our funky fuzzy brush because it'll just give some interest to it later. We'll wind up smoothing a lot of it, but it'll still be under there, all this little fluctuation, which just makes it a little more interesting, I think. Alright, so now we have scary looking eyelids, and we'll do the same with the bottom with the darker color to cover up that a little bit. I know it's hard to believe this is going to become anything good looking, but this is how I start. Alright, so now we have eyes, nose, and stupid looking mouth, and fuzzy edges everywhere. Now, one thing about shapes, something to keep in mind about a shape, is the texture that you perceive for the shape is mostly about the edge. So the reason that this guy still looks fuzzy to us is because the edge of him is fuzzy. if I smooth out the edge, even though the interior still has texture to it, you'll get the impression that it's a smoother thing instead of a fuzzy thing. I'm going to move back down to the skin layer where the skin is and use the eraser. I'm going to erase around them a little bit, adjust the shape a little bit of the head, and just kind of smooth it out just however I feel like it needs to be. Alright, so the eraser is kind of a soft eraser. I'm using let's see, what opacity, I don't know. Right now I'm using 69% opacity on the eraser, but you know, you can do you can do whatever works. I don't really have a specified way that I use the tools all the time. I just kind of screw around with them. So now what I have here now is this. Well, he needs a lot of work, but he's got at least a little bit smoother. He's got no ears, the poor guy. He can't hear anything we're saying. So now I feel the need to work a little bit on the features to define them a little bit better. I want to get the shape of the lips a little better, the nose. And so what I'll start doing now is using both the purple and the skin color, and I will paint over what I have to sort of change the shapes a little bit. And my process is very much an iterative process. I slowly refine it. I start out with this sort of blocky looking guy or girl, and then slowly refine it bit by bit, just by looking at it and, you know, changing it, see how it comes out. I do want to talk a little bit about mouth shape. The most important part of the mouth, as far as expression goes, is the mouth line. So that's where the lower lip meets the upper lip. And I'm defining that now strictly with the shape of the upper lip. And the lower lip is at this point not defined except as an empty space. So by changing the lip line, though, I can make the expression change a lot. If it's straighter, or if it curls up, it'll be more happy. If it curls down more, it'll be more sad looking, that kind of thing. So we'll go for a fairly neutral looking mouth here. I've made it a slightly more feminine mouth by having it be a little bit more curved, and all I've done here is basically chosen the colors that are already there. So I pick the purple and then I do a little bit with it, and then I pick the skin color and I paint around it until I get closer to the shape that I want for that. And then I do the same sort of thing with the nose. I don't like the nose here. I'm going to change it completely because I think it's too far down. I'm going to paint over it and make a new one. Okay, that's close enough for the nose for the moment. It's not much but a shadow right now and basic thing, so let's do that. Now let's work a little bit on the eyes. I'm going to get rid of some of the excessive shadow I have underneath them right now and above them and blend them slightly more. So as I do this part, I'm zooming in and out and I'm looking at it and I'm slowly starting to define the shape of the nose, the shape of the mouth, how the eyes are going to be. And I need to define the chin a little more here, so we need something do something there. I'm still using the same fuzzy brush that we've been using all along. Well, I'll smooth it out here pretty soon. So I've gone back now to using the eraser to define the shape of the face a little bit. It was getting a little bit too chubby cheek there, so I gave it a little bit more shape. And now it's starting to have to me, a more pleasing shape. But now I'm starting to have troubles because I have all this stuff on separate layers, so erasing is becoming difficult. Open the layer menu so you can see the layers that I currently have. So I'm fixing now to, I'm going to actually merge all these layers down except for the background purple one. I'm going to merge them all together into one layer. So before I do that, I will save, and I will also take questions while I'm doing this. Okay, so we're ready to move on to the next stage of our creature creation. Okay, at this point, I've got kind of a general idea of how the face will look. It's a big-eyed to small-mouthed person. Probably, I like the eyes big because I like to make really sparkly eyes, and so the bigger they are, the more sparkle area. What I like to do now, since I have kind of the face shape, I'm gonna put some hair on it. This is how I start my hair. I like to use the vector brush to define the initial shape of hair. It just covers it in a big block, and then I can refine it into actual hair afterwards. To recap, I now have everything here is on one layer except for the background, so that's all we've got is back down to 2 layers. Then on the next layer up, I'm going to grab the vector brush. I don't know how many of you have used the vector brush, but it's kind of an interesting tool. It has a little bit of smoothing that you can add to the edges, and it has a fill setting, which is what I'm going to use here. So whatever color I decide to use, and then I paint an outline, it automatically fills in the outline that I paint. And I think for the color of the hair, we'll use sort of a reddish brown. It may turn more red later. I don't know. It might turn brown. I may change it to blue, but we'll start this way. Yeah, I usually like it to cover the eyes a little bit, have some little barbs or whatever on it. This color is not working though. So I'm going to use a trick. I'm going to use the filter menu and the color changing part of it, and use the hue slider to change the color. That way I can see what it looks like with a few other colors. And there she is with green, which is really gross, but I had to see. And there's more of a, I don't know, magenta. Magenta, man. It's not too bad, but it's a little bit light. But I think I'll leave it that way because I'll show you how to darken it. How I mess around. How I turn this into look like hair. Right now it just looks like a funny sack on her head. There she is with her kind of purpley hair. It's not really driving me wild, but we'll see. We'll probably change the color a bit more. Alright, so now I need to show you the secret of doing hair. Alright, so here is my hair secret, and I know all about hair because I don't have any. I make a bunch of little dots. Some are black, some are gray. And then I use this process that we learned at the beginning and make a custom brush. But there is a little bit of a secret to it. You make the dots, you make your custom brush, and then it's all in the settings, and I'll show you that now. Alright, this is the settings for my hairbrush. Yes, it's a hairbrush, a brush of hair. Notice that the flow is very low. It can be, I've got it 9% here. It could be as low as 2, depending on what you want. This particular set of black and gray works pretty good at 9. And that's it. There's no jitter, there's no taper, this overlap is on, that's it. And the spacing is 0, so it's very close together. That way you get streaks. And I'm going to paint with it so you can see what it looks like when I paint with it. So there I have these, since these are all parallel lines and little streaks, it already looks kind of hair-like, even just painting with it like that. Now I'm going to get rid of it, and I'm going to show you what to do with it on the other layer that we already have underneath here. Alright, so now I'm going to move down to the layer on which I have the vector hair, the ugly looking vector hair, and I'm going to use the blur filter. There's a filter in there called blur. You go to your layer menu, you push filter, you choose blur, and then you turn it up a little bit to 10 or 11, and we'll blur this hair a little bit. I ended up using a blur of 14. So now it's a little bit softer around the edges. Then I'm going to take a slightly darker color of the same, so I will sample the color of the hair, and then I will make it slightly darker and slightly more saturated, and I will use that hairbrush on it. I will use the full size of the brush. The size is 100% and about 50% opacity. And I also set the brush mode to on. And what happens when you set the brush mode to on is it will only paint on any places that are already painted. So that means that it will always stay on the hair that I already have, and it won't go outside the edges. That makes it easier for people like me who can't draw. Now if you want really good looking hair, you have to spend time on it. What I'm going to do here for this one is I'll spend a little time, and I'll change the colors. I'm going to make it lighter and then darker, and then lighter and then darker, and I'll just keep painting over it until I have a number of layers of light and dark on top of each other, all on this, all on the same layer of paint that I'm painting. But the more times you go over it, the more variations and little things you get. It makes it look a little bit better. Okay, so now I've gotten a few layers on there. I'm still not real happy with the hair, but we're going to move on because I don't want to spend more time making it fancier. The other thing that I'll do at this point is I'll take the brush off of its on setting so that I can draw outside the lines, and I'll put some streaks, the little flyaway hairs that go outside. I may draw them in with a pen later, but I'll draw a few now with the brush itself. In other words, I'm moving the brush mode back to over, which is its default mode. Alright, so I don't know, she look a little bit like a harried housewife to me now. I mean, she dyed her hair too many times and she's got this weird color and it's kind of all flyaway, but yeah, okay. We'll go with that for now. We will come back to the hair though. There's a big secret that I need to show you later on how to make this hair actually glow like hair does. Alright, so any questions before I move on to the next phase of the face? Alright, so now we've spent an hour and we have a harried housewife android so far. So I'm going to I usually spend 2 to 3 hours on one of these, and since I'm talking and stopping, it will take a little longer, but we'll try to wrap up inside of 2 hours maybe. I don't know if we'll get there, but we'll try. So now I'm going to smooth out the face a little bit, especially the eyes, just work on them a little. What I will do is switch now to the standard soft round brush, and I will go in with a smaller size and a lower opacity, and I'll play around a little bit with the shapes, especially of the eyes, which right now look like raccoons. Alright, so I smoothed out the eyes just a little bit and around them. Now it looks like strange glasses, and she has no eyelashes, poor thing. We'll put some eyelashes on her in a minute. So I have a brush that I created to do eyelashes with. Let me show you that guy. Alright, so that's the image that I drew to make the eyelash brush. And then I made the custom brush, and I turned the angle so that all the little lashes were kind of going upwards. And then I also used this same exact brush to make that picture, which I called Fuzzy. This guy, he's done with almost all with my eyelash brush. I wasn't really trying to make an eyelash brush, and I wound up with one. And this guy came out of it. You can see on his case, I didn't smooth out much of it, just the lips and the nose and the eyes a little bit. And the rest I left fuzzy. So there it is. Alright, so there, there we have one eyelash, and because I am lazy, I will copy it and flip it and move it to the other eye so that I don't have to do two. Also because my eyelash brush only works in one direction. So now I have two eyelashes. They're not wonderful eyelashes, but they're good enough for what we're doing here. Okay, so now that she has eyelashes, oh, and hair, let's check the hair again. So it's starting to look a little more like an actual painting of something. It has a certain anime feel to it, I think, with the big eyes. But yeah, okay. So we'll go with that. And now we're going to start the shadows, what I call the shadow exploration, I guess. Shadow exploration, that's what we'll call it. That's the official Artigan term for this now. So what I will do is I will go to the layer directly above the face, and I will set it to multiply. Oh, and I have merged the eyelashes down onto the eye layer, which right now has some of the smoothing for the eyes on it. So I have two layers. I have the skin layer and the eye layer, and right above that I'm going to put another layer, and I'm going to set the mode of the layer to multiply, and then I'm going to set the opacity of it right now to about 45% and let it sit there. Then I'm going to take my vector brush again, and I'm going to set the color to black, completely black, and I'm going to draw some shadow areas on here. At first they will look almost ridiculously too dark and strange, but I'll show you what we do with them after we get them on there. Right now what I'm thinking in my head is, where would shadows be? I'm not thinking too much about how dark would they be or anything, but just where are they going to go on the face. Generally speaking, on the face you have a shadow in the eye sockets, under the nose, under the lip, around the chin area, along the edge of the face, whichever side is away from the light, on the side of the nose. And so that's what I'm going to do, draw those in. So we'll go with very simple shadow area on the face, and it's pretty dark and it's got very sharp edges. So now I need to go to the filter menu and choose blur again, which will soften all the edges of this, and then after that I'll decide how dark I actually want it to be by adjusting the opacity of that layer. So there I've blurred it using a blur amount of 22. I could smooth the edges a little more. I'll leave them like that for now. And I'll adjust the opacity a couple ways so you can get the idea, if I make it darker or lighter, what the effect is. So there, with a low opacity, I just have a slight shadow. It's not very dramatic, but it still gives the face a little bit more shape. If I turn the shadow up very dark, then it becomes very dramatic. Like, whoa, that light is bright and that dark is dark. So I probably won't go quite that dramatic with this one, because it just becomes a little harder to control. So I'll pick a medium layer for this now. Put the hair back on, and then we'll see what's going on there. Now I'm not going to change the layer I'm drawing on, but I'm going to draw under the hair and over the face with some more shadows, because now I can see maybe where the hair might cast a shadow a little bit, that kind of thing. Now this time, rather than use the blur from the filter menu, I just used the blur brush to blur the edges a little bit, just to give it a little more 3D-ness. And then usually I'll go to the eye that's in the dark, the shadowed eye, and I will erase a little bit of the shadow right over the eyelid to make the eyelid come forward a little bit. And a lot of times I will also take a little bit of the shadow off of the iris, just because I like bright eyes, so I'll brighten it up a little bit by erasing some of that shadow. Okay, so now we've got some shadows on the face, but we don't have any on the hair. So it looks a little bit odd. The hair is very flat looking. So I'm going to do another of the same kind of thing. I'm going to make another layer above the hair this time. Set it to multiply around 50%, and then I will draw some shadows in there again using the vector brush set to black. I'm not being super careful with my shadowing right now, but it'll be okay. We'll live with it and see how it turns out. Usually I would spend like a really long time on them, but I don't want to do that during the class, so we'll just make them simple. Okay, so now I blurred them like I did before, blurred the shadows, and lightened them up just a bit on the hair. So now the hair at least has a little bit of shape to it. Now just to recap, let's go back to where we came from just so we can have a look and see where we've gone, where we started and where we are now. We're not anywhere near done, but we're getting closer. It's starting to look a little better. We started out here with Gingerbread Man. Hi, Gingerbread Man. We've missed you. Then we went to not quite so Gingerbread Man, but more Raccoon Girl. Slowly refining, like that. And now we're up to woman with a vacuum fetish. That's what, yeah, the harried housewife. Okay, so now we need to give her some pupils. She has no pupils, so let me add some pupils to the eyes, and then we'll go to stage 17.3. I don't know what stage we're on. So for pupils, I want them to be totally round and totally black. I used a hard round brush, set to black, 100% opacity, and I just tap it. And I hope I hit the center of the eye. And if I don't, it's okay. I can move it with transform layer because I have it on a different layer. Did good on that one. Alright, so that's a pupil. Isn't it beautiful? It is lovely. And I will now copy that one and move it to the other eye so that I can center it. Because if they're not in the center, they look wonky. Okay, so now we have pupils. The one looks a little bit large maybe. We might have to enlarge that eye slightly, but it's okay. So there's the pupils, not to be confused with students, which is what you guys are at the moment. I'm going to stop there again for any questions, comments, criticisms. No, just questions. Alright, I guess we've got no questions. So either you're following me well or you've fallen asleep. One or the other. Now we're going to do some Leia magic here because we need to light this girl up a little bit. So let me show you how I start to lighten this up. Number one, at this point we've been working with this same dark purple background. Maybe it's not the best color, so I'm going to play around with the background color, change it, see how it looks, try some different colors, just play around with it until I see something that makes me go, oh, I like that better. Yeah, so there, I like that color better for the background. It gives a little more contrast to the hair in it, sort of bringing out the eyes a little bit. So we'll go with that for the background for now, and then we'll move to the first lighting stage. We'll probably do several of these. Well, I usually do several, but we might only get to one or two here. So the lighting stage. Now, to do a lighting pass, I guess that's a good way to put it, the first lighting pass, I put one layer above all the other layers that I currently have, and I'm going to fill it with black. So there we have the light. Actually, we have no light. We put the poor girl in the dark. So that's not going to work for lighting, is it? We're going to change the layer mode now to Dodge. Dodge. Get out of Dodge. Now, the interesting thing about a Dodge layer that's completely black is it has absolutely no effect whatsoever. You can't tell any difference. If I turn it on or off, it doesn't change anything. So what we're going to do, though, on the Dodge layer is we're going to start painting in gray. Shades of gray. Alright, so now, yes I did. I said get out of Dodge. Okay, get out of there, you Dodge. We have a brush. I'm going to use the soft round brush, just the standard old guy, and a pretty dark gray and a fairly large size. And I'm going to lighten up certain areas. Any place that I paint with this gray will become brighter. So I'm going to do the parts of the face that stick out. The nose, the lips, the chin, the cheeks, a little bit around the brow, and possibly a little bit on the shoulders. You have to be very subtle with this, and it's easy to get carried away with it, and it'll become harsh if you use too much of it. So we'll just do a little bit now, and we may add a little bit more later. I'm going to do some around the hair too. This is all like general shading, so I'm going to brighten up not little pieces but big pieces. Okay, and now I'm going to zoom in on the eyeballs, which I haven't really spent much time making them smooth. They should probably be smoother, but we'll leave them kind of chunky right now, just to show you how the technique works. And I'll use a smaller brush size, and I'll start with this dark gray, and then I'll work up to a brighter gray, and I'm going to. But let me see how to explain this. When you're doing eyes, the light comes in from one side and it reflects off the iris on the other side, like it actually goes through the eye, and then there's a reflection or a bright area on the opposite side from where the light is coming from. So we're going to use the Dodge to lighten up one side of the eye. Having a little problem with that bit of hair that's in front of the eye because it's exactly where I want to brighten things up, and it's causing this pink glow there, so I'm going to erase the hair off the front there a little bit. Okay, so now we have, I mean, they look almost like hollow eyes because there's no highlight yet. But the iris is shaded bright on one side, dark on the other. So now if we add highlights to the eyes, they'll start to look more glassy, more realistic, well, cartoon realistic. A real eye would have more texture inside, and a little, it would, yeah, this is not really realism here. This is a cartoon realism, maybe. This is the only place that I will use pure white usually, is in reflections off the eyes, or possibly off, if there's a piece of metal or some shiny jewelry or something like that. I'm try not to use pure white hardly anywhere, but I will use it as the highlight on the eye, which is what I'm going to put in there now. Now if I want to get more sparkly with them, I can add, a couple of more smaller highlights on the other side. This is a basic cartoon eye right here, as far as the inside of it goes. Okay, so that's good enough for now for the eyes. They're pretty enough. Now we need to do something about the hair, because the hair is looking kind of drab. So we're going to go back to that hairbrush that we used to do the streaks, and we're going to paint with it in a darkish gray color on the dodge layer, and we're going to add highlights to the hair using the hairbrush. Usually add a few places where I use a very light gray to make a more intense highlight, and if I find I've overdone it, like I have here a little bit, all I have to do is go back to a darker gray and paint over the part that's too bright. You'll probably want to spend more time than that, but you get the idea. The hair begins to look shiny. Alright, so now I'm looking at this and thinking about it, and the face is looking really too yellow. We'll have to deal with that. But let's just start by adding a little bit of blush kind of color to the cheeks and the nose, maybe the lip, warm it up a little bit. To do that, I'm going to use the soft round brush and just dab a little bit here and there, make it a little bit pinker. Pinker. There, I got a little bit of a glow to her. Yeah, I'm looking. I'm looking at her hair now. It really came out pink this time. It didn't really intend for it to be so pink, but that's what we got. All right. So now that I'm looking at this, we're at the stage now where I would actually spend more time refining the facial features, but I'm going to skip that for now. You'll have to think about that yourself, because I want to show you some of the finishing steps that I do to make the whole thing hang together and pop a little more. Yeah, I'm looking at her hair now. It really came out pink. All right, do we, yeah, maybe I should stop for questions. Do we have questions? What's that about the Dodge layer? Alright, now at this point we have a reasonably pretty face on a boring background. So I like to like screw it up. I want to take what I have now and I want to just kind of mess it all up and see what happens. So I'm going to merge all these guys down a little bit. Well, let me see, how many layers do I have here? Hold on a sec. We got a couple of empty layers at the top still, so we're good. We're going to go to one of those top layers, and we're going to pick a brush that has some kind of a pattern to it, and I don't know, maybe I'll paint just right over the top, you know, some spatters, some colors. At this point I just want to kind of mess it up so that it's not quite so pristine, and then see if it generates any ideas in me as I look at it. Okay, so I kind of painted over it, and now I'm going to play with the different layer modes. So that has all the layers have all these different blending modes. They've got burn and dodge and exclusion and color and overlay, and I'm going to try each of those just to see what the effect is. Okay, so I got to this one here, which is color, the color mode, and I like what's happening, like to the hair, a little bit of the skin. So I'm going to paint a little more of that, and then I'll erase some that I don't like, just to get that effect, because I like the effect of it. It just makes it kind of more interesting. Yeah, so it was kind of random, but it's given us a little bit more interest, and it's also warmed it up, which was bothering me that it wasn't warm enough. So it's a little warmer now. So now I'm going to go back to the background, a layer just above the background, and I'm going to play around with some colors back there and some patterns to make that a little more interesting too. I'm going to use the line tool, so that I'm going to use a brush, but I set it to line so that it only draws straight lines. And then I'll also put mirroring on left and right and up and down, so both mirroring, and that'll just kind of make some patterns and stuff in the back. See what we get. Trying to, make something out of the background. I don't want to spend a lot of time showing you how to do backgrounds, so we're just going to make something interesting. Two-way mirror. Yeah, if you only have a one-way mirror, it's fine too. The Beta has a two-way mirror, so you can do them both. But if you can only mirror left and right, that works, or up and down. Ah, you like that brush? Hey, that's one of my custom brushes. Yes, I make lots of them. So this might be Noel's brush. Is this Noel's brush? I think it might be. I do download them. There's a lot of great brushes up there. You don't have to make your own. There's a bunch of cool ones up there already. Alright, so, we could spend more time on the background. I would probably, put some more shadows on it or whatever, but we'll leave it like that for the moment. It's probably enough for the class, but you can play around like that to make interesting patterns. You can make it look more organic, make it look more like a jungle or a city or whatever, just by playing around like that. And of course, you don't have to mirror it at all. You can just draw stuff back there. But since I wanted patterns, the mirror helps patterns just kind of emerge as I draw. Okay, so now we have, this. There's not, it's still not that interesting to me. I would want to decorate this some more in some ways. I would want something going on besides just a face in the background, but we don't have time to go much further. We've already been doing 2 hours. So I'm going to show you my last couple of things that I do to call a thing finished. Okay, now before we do these final things that I normally do, we save. Of course we save. And then we take the big jump of merging all. And to do that, you select the very bottom layer and you choose merge all. And that's going to take everything we have and put it in just one layer, which means it becomes more difficult to change. That's why you wait till the end to do that. So I'm going to do that now, merge everything. So now we are done to I did it as one big glomp, and then I used my special hairbrush to do the strands. You can go back and watch the video of this. There will be one to see how the hair was done. Okie doke. So now I've got merged all. I've merged all, and I'm going to start using filters on this one layer that I have. I'm going to first use the standard color filter, and I'm going to bump up just the saturation a little bit to make the colors brighter. This one didn't need a heck of a lot more saturation. It was already pretty saturated, but I added just a tiny bit. And I'm going to also use the vibrance filter and play with it a little bit to see if I can make it a little deeper. Okay, so now I've added a little vibrance. It's maybe a little too much now, but that's alright. We'll live with it. Now I also would usually bring up the highlights and shadows filter and play around a little bit with the shadows, because I might like it to be a little darker perhaps. So I made it a little bit darker by adding a little more shadows with the highlights and shadows filter. The filters are great. You can really change the look of the thing. Now I'm going to play a little bit with the exposure one, which will actually do the opposite. It'll brighten the whole thing up. I'm not sure it needs to be brighter, but maybe it does. I'm going to check that. I decided that the exposure is not necessary. It becomes washed out and weird looking. So now I might want to add some texture to this. In order to do that, I can use another filter trick. I might as well show you all my filter tricks at once here. So I'm going to cover this up now with a gray layer. So I'm going to put a layer above all of these and make it gray. But first I'm going to save this in case I mess this up. Okay, so now it's lovely gray. Lovely gray. I'm going to use the layer filter. And the name of the filter I'm going to use is Hatched Screen. And I'm going to bring it up and I'm going to tweak the settings until I get what basically looks like cross-hatched lines. It's hard to describe how to do that. I should probably take a screenshot of the settings. Hold on a sec. So my gray layer now looks like this. It's got all these lines through it. Let me show you the settings here. There, okay, those are the settings that I was using to make those diagonal lines. You can make them, you know, bigger or smaller. You can change the angle. And now that I have this layer of diagonal lines over the top, I'll show you what to do with it. Yeah, hatched is there. Hatched is there. So now what I've done is I've set the layer blend mode to soft light. You can also use overlay or hard light or whatever, just the amount of it, just to give it like sort of a texture as though it's like drawn on fabric or something. It's just a way to, you know, I probably won't use that for this one, but it is kind of a cool effect. Alright, so I don't know if I'll leave that in there or not, but it's sort of interesting. We'll leave a little bit of it on there, perhaps. And yeah. Then the last thing that I sometimes do this when I just want sparkly stuff, if I want it to be sparkly. I add another layer, set it to black like before, and set it to dodge. And as I set it to dodge, it disappears. And now I take some kind of a pattern brush, maybe a sparkly brush or I don't know, a brush that has little twinkles in it or something, and I draw in close to white but not quite white. Depends, I have to play around with the opacity, and I can make little sparkles appear on there, maybe on the eyes or maybe around the head, whatever. Obviously this is something that is not going to work for everything, but you can use that dodge layer to make, you know, like little magic kind of look. Something, it's just kind of up to you how you want to deal with it. Any place I want to get rid of it, I can just do it black. You know, I kind of like that strange rave light in her hair, so I might leave that there. Yes, it's very neonish and very bright. And then the last thing I do before I call something finished is I crop it a little bit. So in order to do that, what I do is I merge it all down to one layer again, and then I set the layer to not quite 100% opacity. You can see it looks a little bit washed out. And then I'm going to use the layer transform, and as I transform it, I'll be able to see where the edges are, because they'll show through as white edges. It's hard to describe how it looks when you do it, but it's easy to see. And you can make it a little bigger, tilt it a little bit, and you can kind of cut off the edges. And that way you can kind of zoom in and crop the image so that it doesn't have any extra junk around the edges. Sometimes that'll make it look better. So I decided to cut it off a little bit more on the side and have that eye kind of in the center. I guess that's it. All right. So now I've cropped it. It's cropified. So we'll save this out to another slot. Right, it breaks up the symmetry. I thought it was a little bit too centered. I wanted to move it over a little bit. I can play around with that for a while, tilt it, but we'll leave it like this for now. Alright, so now all we have to do is use the pen and sign our name, and we'll call it done. So any other questions? Yes, we came a long way from Gingerbread Man, didn't we? So that's my strange method for coming up with just all different faces. Of course, you don't have to make female faces. You can do mean faces, big faces, scary faces, monster faces, anything. That's where we started, and that's where we ended. There we go.